Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today's big question is, which basketball era is the best? Was basketball back in the 90s better than today's NBA? Are NBA players nowadays soft? Or is it just players adapting to how the game of basketball is constantly changing? We'll take a look at the opinions of NBA legends and see what they have to say. Today's topic is NBA legends on today's NBA. But before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more. Stephen A. Smith made it clear that he thinks today's NBA players are soft and stands by his argument. Kevin Garnett, Shaquille O'Neal, and Jalen Rose had an interesting take of comparing today's NBA to the era they played in. Let's check out what they had to say.
What would Michael Jordan be if he played in the game today the way the game is different from the way it was in his era?
He'd average 45, and the league would be complaining about two players. It'd be like, Mike is too good. And the kid named Shaq down in Orlando was too dominant. What are we going to do?
What do you think, Steve? Go ahead.
I agree with him. I definitely agree with him. Listen, go ahead, Shaq.
Who is that?
That's Stephen A. Smith. That's a name you
It's
probably
me,
know.
man. Don't act like you don't know it's me. You know it's me, man. What's going on?
You've been at, man. I miss you, brother.
I missed you too, bro. But definitely, Greeny, Shaq would have been most dominant. No question. Shaq was the most dominant force that I saw in the modern era, and Michael Jordan would have been the best player without question. And the difference between a Michael Jordan compared to a James Harden, we're not thinking about defense because we know there's no comparison there. But offensively, even though James Harden is incredibly dominant, the amount of dribbles that he utilizes with the basketball, Michael Jordan would not have handled it that way. He would have been much more in attack mode with considerably less dribbling of the basketball.
Shaq, let me ask you this. Earlier this week, and it got a lot of attention, and Stephen A. weighed in pretty strongly on it here, Mark Jackson said on the air that players of the era in which Michael was at his apex when you first came into the league were cut from a different cloth than the players are today. When you hear that, as one who is still around the game as much as you are, what do you think?
There's some truth to that, and I didn't realize that. Kenny Smith said something on the show one day. He said, we are all products of our environment. So I was like, what are you talking about, Kenny? Because you know Kenny likes to babble. And when he broke it down, it made sense. He said, okay, when he was growing up, he was watching guys like Tiny Archibald, how they played. So, you know, he developed his game after that. When I was growing up, I was watching Patrick Ewing, Ronnie Cycli, guys like that in the middle. They played hard. They played tough. I was watching the bad boys. So I patterned my game after that. So then when I came in and started beating these centers up and everybody wanted to pick and pop, that's when you got guys like Dirk and KG and even Kevin Duncan. So the guys that are playing now, they didn't watch me. They watched Duncan and guys like Dirk, guys that step out. And that's why they play the way that they play. Like even when I'm working out with my son, I want to be like, bang him out, bang him out, bang him out. But that's not how they play anymore. So I allow him to go out and, work on the face-up jumper, work on the James Harden side, step three-pointer, all that stuff, because he's a product of his environment. The guys that he's watching in the NBA, this is what they do. So it really is some truth to what Mark Jackson said.
Steve?
He's absolutely right. I mean, definitely you're a product of your environment. There's no question about it. And the folks that you watched up emulating ultimately is what you grab a hold of and you take that to another level. Connie Hawkins came before Dr. J. Julius Erving, along with David Thompson, by the way. And then after Dr. J. Julius Erving, here comes MJ. Well, what would MJ have had to emulate? As great as he was, as phenomenal as he was, it was taken to another level by and large because of the people who preceded him, the Dr. J's, David Thompsons, Connie Hawkins, and guys like that. When we think about Steph Curry, well, guess what? He had his father before him. Oh, by the way, there was the Dale Ellises of the world. Later on, it was Ray Allen. Back in the Dale Ellis days, along with Mr. Curry himself, you also had guys like Ricky Pierce. Remember downtown Freddie Brown from the Seattle Supersonics in the 1970s or in the late 70s, early 80s. All of those things are byproduct. You peel from that to learn what greatness to emulate and ascend towards by virtue of those who came before you.
It is true that it's hard to compare different eras in the NBA because the game has changed so much. The NBA isn't that tough league it used to be back in the day that we all used to love. Today's NBA is full of athletic, highly skilled players who play the same game, but the game will never stop evolving. So let's dive back in to hear what NBA legends have to say about today's NBA.
Had a really interesting quote about intergenerational basketball. Here's what the big ticket had to say about the players of today. I don't think guys from 20 years ago could play in this game. It's creative, it's competitive, it's saucy. You'll get dropped across you over and break your ACL these days. This game is in a great place. Jalen, you played 20 years ago. What do you think about his statements on this cross-generational comparison?
The game is in a great place. It has always been in a great place. And I agree with the big ticket. Each time a generation happens, they're gonna look at the past generation and either over-exaggerate why it was better or why it was worse. So I have an iPhone right now, and I know it does a lot more than my Sky Pager that I had back in the day. But when Sky Pager was out, it was that deal. And so KG is right. But also, remember when he came out of high school and so many other players did? Elder statesmen felt the same way. These young players don't have what it takes to have staying power in the league. And before you know it, guys like he and Kobe and Tracy McGrady going to be Hall of Famers, and the league worked in reverse. They made it so those guys couldn't come out after high school anymore because teams had to protect themselves because they found themselves recruiting 9th graders, looking at 10th graders, trying to get them to come out after the draft. And so the big ticket does have a point. Players are more skilled, they shoot with more range, they're bigger, stronger, faster, the access to medicine, hyperbaric chambers, and all of that. But the one thing today's game does not have that KG embodied, that's physical intimidation. That does not exist in today's game. Let somebody make a shot on the big ticket and they want to hit their chest or they want to push to the ground. He wouldn't have been so enthusiastic about that part.
So Jalen, we discussed this previously to the show, and we do think that your game would translate to this new generation because of your height and your ability to do many things with the basketball. However, the champagne and campaigning would not translate. You'd be on at TMZ every morning. That's the only problem with changing you on the court would be fine in today's game. Champagne and campaign would be tough.
You got some dudes that are just wusses. Let's just call it what it is, Jeannie. Let's just call it what it is, Greeny and Jalen. There are some dudes that's just soft as putty. They are they don't want to have a conversation man to man with you to handle their business. They use others to do it for them. And I don't have any respect for that.
So I want everyone to have an understanding of how we then came to this conversation. So Dominique Foxworth, who was on the show yesterday but was not part of that conversation, just sent a note to our show email saying Jordan was out playing golf and gambling late into the night before playoff games. Larry Bird was in bar fights in the middle of a championship run. Rodman went to Vegas midseason. LeBron is in a hyperbaric chamber, but they wanted it more.
I didn't call them wussies, and I didn't call them soft. Stephen A's an adult, he can speak for himself. But here's what I will say. Social media is something you can use to your benefit or your detriment. Trust me, Dominique, you can look at the NFL, there are 1,300 players. You can look at the almost 500 players in the NBA. You don't think they're gambling? You don't think they're hanging out?
So my point is,
so Aaron Donald, they can play in any era. Same as LeBron James, same as Kevin Durant. That's going to translate in any era. But let's not act like in order to be that great player and or to be that champion, the obstacles have changed a lot. Here are a couple of terms that I hear now that I didn't used to hear, Dominique. Things like load management, no two-a-days, less Oklahoma drills, less padded practices, things like that. That's what the current player is able to do. So I'm not, do you think football now is as physical, is as it used to be? Less
no,
two
it's
tight
not as
ends,
physical.
not really fullbacks.
it's certainly not as visible, but the players that play in these leagues are no less tough. And I would say the same thing, like the players who are in the NBA had to go through a lot more. It's a global game now. There's a lot more competition. So you could argue that the crucible that they went through was much more difficult than the ones that the players before. I just find it uncomfortable when people start talking about the comparing eras like these guys are so different. The environment has changed, and the players have changed to their environment. The cloth is the same.
That's what I'm saying, correct.
Around them.
So now that we've heard what some legends have to say about today's NBA, who do you agree with? Or what is your opinion? I believe the game of basketball is constantly evolving, and players look up to the players before them to model their game after, just like Shaq was saying. We need the game to keep evolving so the game always stays new and fresh. So I would love to hear what you guys think, and also let us know what basketball era is your favorite. Thanks for tuning in to watch today's video. If you enjoyed it, click on that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.